The officer stopped him solely because of his skin color. An old car, a suspicious glance, a routine check that quickly turned into threats. None of them knew they were facing their future captain, whose quiet dignity would soon shatter their prejudice and ignite a city-wide scandal, marking the start of long-avoided changes in the force. On the outskirts of the city, the silence was broken only by the occasional sounds of passing cars and the creaking branches of trees overhanging the narrow road. In a patrol car parked by the roadside sat two white officers, Sergeant Randy Harris and Officer Tom Martin. Dusk was falling, and the sky was tinged with an ashy gray, reflected in the dirty windows of the old patrol car. Randy, a large man with heavy features and short stubble, wore a sour expression. He occasionally shook his head grumblingly, complaining about the decay of tradition and unnecessary changes that he felt were destroying the order he was used to. His partner, the young and inexperienced Tom, seemed quiet and somewhat tense, choosing to stay silent in response to his senior's griping. Suddenly, Randy noticed an old car crawling down the road, emitting muffled engine sounds. Pressing his lips into a thin line, he squinted, scrutinizing the driver. He saw a black man driving calmly, clearly in no hurry. In the sergeant's mind, a plan immediately formed to have a little fun and check the driver's documents, hoping to catch him on some violation. Crossing his arms over his chest, Randy leaned forward and cast a quick glance at his partner. "Well, Tom, let's liven up this dull shift," Randy smirked, pressing the button to turn on the flashing lights. "Turn on the siren. Let's see how he reacts to us." They pulled up to the car, and Randy stepped out first, walking slowly with an air of authority. Tom followed him cautiously, striving to stay calm. As they reached the window, Randy knocked on it with his fingers, tapping as if reminding the driver of his authority to inspect and control. When the window rolled down, they saw a man in his 40s, composed and self-assured. He wore a dark t-shirt and a simple jacket. His gaze was calm and focused, his expression confident, showing no sign of fear or irritation. This calm demeanor immediately threw Randy off his usual rhythm. "Let's see your documents," Randy barked, intentionally raising his voice as if testing the driver's composure. "Is there any particular reason for driving this slow?" The man handed over his documents without a hint of anxiety. His calmness irritated Randy. Glancing at the ID, Randy raised his eyebrows and sneered. "That's quite an old car you've got there. Looks pretty suspicious, too. You're lucky to even have something like this to drive," he added, not hiding his disdain. The man listened to this comment in silence and replied steadily, looking Randy directly in the eyes. "I take care of my car, sir, and my documents are in order." Randy was slightly taken aback by this calm retort, but tried to cover it with a sneer, continuing in a sarcastic tone. "Well, we'll see if everything's really in order, as you say." Randy, increasingly irritated by the man's composure, shifted to a more threatening tone, his face growing darker. He stared intently at the driver, his gaze hiding a barely concealed threat. "Seems like you don't understand who you're talking to," he hissed through gritted teeth, raising a finger to the badge on his uniform. "Maybe an arrest will help you see things differently." Tom, standing slightly behind, could see that Randy was overstepping his authority. The young officer shifted uncomfortably, feeling a moral conflict, but too hesitant to intervene. His face reflected concern and tension, but he continued to observe in silence, his gaze fixed on the ground. "An arrest? And on what grounds exactly?" the man behind the wheel asked calmly, maintaining eye contact with Randy. "I think you have no grounds for that, and if it helps, you can call the department to confirm everything's fine on my end." The man's words only infuriated the sergeant further. His eyes flashed with anger. He clearly wasn't used to such a calm and, to him, defiant tone from an ordinary citizen. "Fine, if you're so sure, step out of the car," Randy snapped, pulling the door open and yanking the handle, forcing the man to step outside. The driver complied, stepping out slowly and calmly, his hands folded in front of him. Randy and Tom, maintaining serious expressions, began searching his car, rifling through items as if hoping to find something incriminating. The man watched this calmly, but unlike him, The growing crowd of passers-by began to voice their disapproval. "Hey, what's going on here?" came discontented voices from the crowd. People pulled out their phones, turning on cameras to capture the incident. "Is this a routine check, or are you just giving him a hard time for no reason?" The crowd was growing, and a sense of bewilderment and indignation filled the air. Bystanders, puzzled by the officer's vigorous search of an old car, began whispering among themselves, occasionally asking aloud why they had stopped this driver in the first place. Meanwhile, the man, still composed, allowed a slight smile to cross his face as he looked straight at Randy and said, "I think you'd better stop this. It looks like someone from your leadership will be here soon to clear things up." These words threw Randy and Tom into confusion. Tom's heart raced with anxiety. Who was this man? When another patrol car arrived on the scene, everyone's attention, including the officers and the onlooking crowd, was focused on the newly arrived vehicle. The car stopped, and a tall black man in a crisp police uniform with captain's insignia stepped out. His face bore an unbreakable mask of calm, and his gaze, as he looked at Randy and Tom, was cold and calculating. Seeing the captain, Randy was momentarily speechless. His face froze in a mix of horror and confusion. He slowly began to realize that the suspicious driver was, in fact, their new boss. Tom, standing slightly aside, looked frightened and confused. Shame flickered in his eyes as he realized he'd been part of this unjust incident, and now felt the full weight of what had happened. The captain approached his subordinates calmly, looked at them, and firmly declared, "It seems I arrived just in time to put an end to this nonsense. As your new captain, I want you both to understand that we now have a new order. It's based on respect, fairness, and equality, not on prejudice and humiliation." His words were sharp and precise, like a blade cutting into Randy's ego. The sergeant, trying to pull himself together, stammered out a defensive excuse, shaking his head. "Captain, we didn't know it was you, and the car looked suspicious." His voice trembled, panic clear in his words as he tried to wriggle out of the situation. But the captain cut him off abruptly, raising his voice. "Enough, Sergeant. I don't care who's behind the wheel or in what car. Everyone deserves respect. Your behavior insulted not only me, but the entire department." He shot Randy a look filled with contempt, then turned to Tom, adding, "If you want to continue serving under my leadership, you'll have to learn not only to follow orders, but also to treat people with humanity. This kind of behavior is unacceptable, and from now on, we won't be turning a blind eye to it." The crowd, watching this unfold, erupted in approving shouts, some even applauding the captain. Sergeant Randy stood there, pale, unable to say another word, realizing that his joke had come to a bitter end. Tom, lowering his head, appeared guilty and embarrassed, as if only now realizing how wrong their behavior had been. Without giving them another glance, the captain returned to his car, leaving the officers to digest what had happened and the crowd to discuss how justice had finally prevailed. The next day, tension filled the atmosphere at the department. News of yesterday's incident had spread across the city and beyond. Video footage from the scene had gone viral on social media, sparking a wave of comments, outrage, and condemnation. The clip, showing Randy's threats and belittling of the driver for no apparent reason, accompanied by footage of the captain coldly instructing his subordinates on the importance of respect, was gaining popularity fast. The morning briefing began with the captain standing before the assembly, declaring firmly, "What happened yesterday is a perfect example of what should never occur in our department. We are here to serve and protect, not to misuse power for humiliation and prejudice. Starting today, we're implementing mandatory cultural sensitivity and citizen respect training. Every officer will complete this course, and such behavior will no longer go unpunished." Silence filled the room. Colleagues exchanged glances. Some appeared embarrassed, while others clearly supported the new measures. Many were moved by the captain's resolve and his determination to enforce justice. Randy sat as if in a trance. He realized that the viral video had destroyed his career. The storm of public outrage and pressure from all sides left him with no other choice. Understanding that his days in the police force were over, Randy quietly left the room to submit his resignation. His face was gloomy, his movements heavy. For years he had considered himself an untouchable part of the system, only to realize he had become its victim, ruining his reputation by his own actions. Meanwhile, young Officer Tom, sitting in the corner, felt a strange sense of relief. Recognizing his mistake, he resolved to change, realizing that he no longer wanted to be part of unjust actions. The silence in the room weighed on him heavier than any punishment. He felt shame, but within that feeling lay a spark of determination, a desire to become a better officer, one who truly serves the people rather than abusing his authority. The training sessions announced by the captain symbolized a chance for change for Tom, and he vowed never again to blindly follow prejudiced orders.